Picture this, 1933. The order goes out, and suddenly gold is no longer just money. It is evidence. The government does not begin by searching every floorboard in America. It begins with the easy layer. Bank ledgers, safe deposit records, brokerage relationships, tax trails. The people who believed they owned gold because an institution acknowledged it were the first people exposed. Their wealth was already translated into paperwork, location, and identity. In a crisis, that is what makes seizure efficient. This is the first thing most people miss about confiscation. The state does not need to know everything. It only needs to know enough. Enough names, enough addresses, enough custodians, enough fear to make the visible surrender voluntarily, while the invisible remains difficult, fragmented, and expensive to pursue. That is the fracture. On paper, ownership looks safe. It looks formal, document, defensible. But under pressure, the same visibility that makes an asset convenient also makes it searchable. And once it is searchable, it becomes governable. That was true when gold sat inside bank channels in 1933. It is even more true now, when modern wealth lives inside brokerage apps, payment rails, KYC files, tax databases, cloud accounting systems, and platforms that can be queried in seconds. So this video is not really about gold. It is about a harder question. When a system turns hostile, how much of what you call wealth can be seen without your consent? Because visibility is not a side issue. It is the prerequisite. April 5, 1933. Executive Order 6102 did not emerge from nowhere. It came after the Emergency Banking Act in March gave the administration broad authority over domestic gold movements. The legal architecture came first. The moral language came second. Citizens were told that surrender was necessary for national recovery, while the machinery of identification was already sitting inside the banking system. And this is where the forensic distinction matters. The order did not require the government to physically discover every hidden coin in America. It required people to deliver most gold coin, bullion, and gold certificates to the Federal Reserve or member banks by May 1, 1933, with narrow exemptions, including up to $100 in gold coin and certain collector pieces. In other words, the state set a deadline, criminalized non-compliance, and leaned on the existing financial map. The threat was not trivial. The order stated that willful violation could bring a fine of up to $10,000, up to 10 years in prison, or both. That alone explains much of the confiscation. You do not need omniscient enforcement when the visible population is already documented, and the penalties are severe enough to induce self-reporting. Then came the second blow. In January 1934, the Gold Reserve Act transferred title to Federal Reserve gold to the United States, and Roosevelt revalued gold from $20.67 to $35 an ounce. The citizen who surrendered gold at the old statutory price was left holding devalued dollars, while the state captured the revaluation benefit. This is the part polite retellings often soften. The loss was not only the surrender of metal, it was the forced conversion of one form of savings into another. Just before the rules changed in the government's favor, at street level that meant something brutally simple. If your savings were visible, legible, and stored where institutions could point to them, your ownership became conditional, not theoretical, not philosophical, administrative. And that is the lesson to keep in view as we leave 1933 behind. Seizure is rarely a dramatic raid first. It is usually a records problem first. If 1933 shows how visible wealth is pressured, the Soviet Union and post-independence India show the other side of the pattern. Why states repeatedly fail to eliminate privately held stores of value once those stores fall outside formal channels. In the USSR, official ideology treated private wealth accumulation with suspicion, and the state built a system designed to absorb economic life into central control. But ordinary people still needed ways to preserve value through shortages, currency distortions, arbitrary pricing, and political uncertainty. They used what the state could not easily count: jewelry, coins, durable household goods, foreign currency when available, personal networks, favors, repair skills, access, informal statistics. Much of that world barely existed. In lived reality, it was often the difference between dependence and room to maneuver. That is the first forensic rule. When official money stops functioning as a trustworthy savings vehicle, people do not stop saving. They migrate into forms the system cannot fully read. India in the 1960s makes the mechanism even clearer. Gold controls tightened. Dealers were restricted. Ownership faced pressure. The official logic was familiar: mobilize savings, curb hoarding, redirect private behavior toward national priorities. But the deeper reality was that gold in India was never just an investment line item. It lived as dowry wealth, household insurance, women's jewelry, family memory, emergency collateral, and social status stored in metal. That meant it was dispersed, culturally embedded, and often held outside any clean registry. So the state could regulate shops. It could arrest declared inventories. It could criminalize parts of the trade. What it struggled to do was identify, locate, and extract millions of small private holdings diffused across homes, kinship networks, villages, and informal markets. This is what modern viewers tend to underestimate. An asset survives pressure not only because it has value, but because it sits inside a context that makes enumeration expensive. Informal storage is not magical. It has risks: theft, loss, illiquidity, family dispute. But from the standpoint of seizure, its power is simple. It breaks the map. The paper owner depends on the system to acknowledge his claim. The informal holder accepts inconvenience in exchange for opacity, and across broken systems, opacity repeatedly wins the first round. The modern version of the gold registry is not a vault list. It is a data architecture. Today, most legal wealth leaves a trail by design. Banks and brokers are required to identify customers through customer due diligence and record-keeping regimes. FATCA's global standards make that explicit. Financial institutions are expected to know who the customer is, understand beneficial ownership in many cases, and maintain records that make financial activity reconstructible for authorities. That is not a conspiracy. It is the normal operating logic of the modern financial system. Now add the direction of travel. The BIS has argued that future monetary infrastructure may evolve toward more integrated programmable systems that connect central bank money, commercial bank money, and tokenized assets on shared platforms or unified ledgers. In plain language, that means more interoperability, more standardized data, and more opportunities for permissions, conditions, and automated compliance to sit inside the rails themselves. Supporters present this as efficiency, and some of it is. Faster settlement, fewer frictions, cleaner audits, better enforcement. But from a forensic perspective, efficiency for the system also means legibility of the user. The more your economic life is mediated by institutions that must identify you, classify you, and report on you, the easier it becomes to freeze, limit, query, or redirect activity without ever sending an officer to your door. Even the privacy debate around CBDCs is framed this way. The IMF notes that CBDC design involves difficult choices over data use, privacy protection, and access by intermediaries and authorities. That should tell you something important. The question is no longer whether digital money produces data. The question is who can see which data, under what conditions, and how easily it can be linked back to a real person. So when people say, "I have nothing to hide," they are answering the wrong question. The real question is whether you want every meaningful store of value, every transaction pathway, and every emergency option attached to a searchable institutional identity. Because once wealth becomes fully legible, control no longer requires confiscation in the old sense. It can be administered through access, So what does lower visibility wealth actually look like in practice? Not fantasy, not tax evasion, not bunker theatrics. It looks like holding part of your resilience in forms that remain useful, even when the institutional layer becomes restrictive, delayed, or selectively hostile. Think of it as an analog buffer around a digital life. Start with physical metal, not because it is sacred and not because it always outperforms, because it is compact, durable, and does not depend on a counterparty to exist. Its weakness is obvious. It can be stolen, discovered, or sold at a spread. But its strength is equally obvious. It is not a database entry waiting for permission to move. Then tools and durable goods. Productive equipment, repair gear, spare parts, quality hand tools, water filtration, power backup, communications equipment, secure storage. In calm periods, these look boring. In stress periods, they turn into retained function. They preserve your ability to work, maintain property, avoid predatory pricing, and help others. That is a form of wealth most portfolios do not recognize until it is suddenly scarce. Then skills, mechanical competence, food storage, negotiation, basic medical response, trade knowledge, the ability to repair, source, transport, verify, or adapt. Skills are the most invisible asset of all because they do not sit in custody anywhere. They move with the holder, cross borders more easily than objects, and become more valuable when systems lose reliability. This is the untrackable triad. Some value in things, some in function, and some in capability. None of this is perfect. Physical assets carry custody risk. Skills take time. Tools are not liquid. But that is the trade. You are exchanging some convenience and institutional recognition for resilience outside a single ledger. And for people who understand the forensic record, that is not paranoia. It is diversification across visibility. Here's the test. Sit down and list everything you own that matters. Cash in banks, brokerage accounts, retirement accounts, property titles, business interests, payment apps, digital wallets linked to your name, precious metals in custody, insurance-linked cash values, platform balances, even subscription-dependent income. Then mark each line with one question. Does an institution know this exists, know it is mine, and know where it is? That is your wealth visibility audit. Next, divide what remains into 3 categories: fully registered, partially visible, operationally private. Fully registered means easily searchable through normal compliance channels. Partially visible means the asset exists in the real world, but leaves some trail through purchase, storage, access, or transport. Operationally private means usable value that is difficult to enumerate quickly because it is distributed, informal, skill-based, or physically held outside centralized custody. Now the hard part, concentration. If one policy shift, one frozen account, one reporting threshold, one platform lockout, or one jurisdictional decision can trap most of your usable wealth, then you do not have a portfolio. You have a dependency structure. The protocol is not to disappear. It is to reduce single ledger exposure, spread custody across institutions, hold some reserves physically, keep some productive tools outside finance, build at least one income-relevant skill that survives platform failure. Avoid storing every lifeline in the same legal and digital box. Privacy is not your entire defense, but in stress systems, it is often the condition that allows every other defense to work. In the end, the choice is brutally simple. You can own wealth that is recognized, or you can own wealth that still functions when recognition is withdrawn.